pretty jaw-dropping story came out of the judiciary over the past couple days. The Alliance Defending Freedom filed suit in February against the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference on behalf of 3 girls. And these girls are student athletes. And the lawsuit, I think it's a pretty legitimate gripe. The girls want to be able to compete in girls' sports against other girls. It doesn't sound that radical to me. And yet, because of our new gender ideology that the radical left is forcing on the country, the girls were forced to compete against boys, albeit boys who pretended that they were girls. And guess what happened? I think you probably won't be surprised to find out the boys tended to win because boys and girls are different, and boys physically are stronger than girls. And so obviously that's how it turns out. Now they're filing this suit, and the judge in the case, at the very beginning, he said, okay, we'll hear out the case, but before we begin, you're not allowed to refer to the boys who are saying that they're girls as boys. You have to refer to them as girls, which means from the beginning of the case, the judge is already saying that the transgender activists are correct. From the beginning of the case, he's already come to his conclusion. Very complicated issue, pretty much a head scratcher. Luckily, to join us now and help us make some sense of it is one of the great writers on this issue in the country, Madeleine Kearns, the William F. Buckley Fellow in Political Journalism at the National Review Institute. Maddie has written for the Wall Street Journal, Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Scotsman, the Catholic Herald, Heterodox Academy, everywhere. She is all over the place. Maddie, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Always a pleasure.
So I need you to help me make sense of this because maybe I'm a little bit slow. Maybe I'm just missing something. But if the judge in this case is saying at the very outset that everybody, including the plaintiffs and the attorneys, have to refer to the boys as girls, then isn't he basically saying that he's throwing out the complaint in the first place?
I mean, pretty much, which is why the Alliance Defending Freedom have asked that he recuse himself. The problem is there's a disagreement about what the point of this case is. So the plaintiffs, so the 3 high school girls, see it as you see it and as I see it, to do with biological sex. The reality is, no matter what you call these boys, they are still boys, they are still male, and they do have innate advantages. That's the point. The point for us is sex. And the point of the argument is in relation to Title IX, which spells out protections for women and girls on the basis of sex. That's the wording. What the left do and what the defendants are doing in this case, and now the judge as well, is conflating sex with this gender identity, this theory that actually they're kind of the same thing and one overrides the other. And really, it's very offensive to call transgender girls, inverted commas, anything but transgender girls or girls. And so calling them males is too offensive, and so we can't really proceed if you can't get on board with that. Of course, as you point out, that means it's kind of a case closed, but they see it a different way. They think that they can play these little rhetorical sleight of hand and nobody will notice.
Well, that's the whole problem, I guess. I mean, if you really zoomed out from the broader perspective of how we've gotten to this point, it would seem that one of the culprits is political correctness, right? Calling things as they are not. So pretending that just because you call a boy a girl, then all of a sudden the boy really is a girl. But of course, we know that isn't the case. I want to focus in a little bit on 2 words that you just said. Title IX. Title IX, as I understand it, among other things, establishes girls' sports at schools, and that's so that there's not, discrimination on the basis of sex. The left has made a big issue out of that phrase, on the basis of sex. Ruth Bader Ginsburg made a career out of that phrase, on the basis of sex. And yet now, if the left is going to redefine sex away from your actual biological sex into your kind of perceived gender identity, then doesn't that completely undermine Title IX? In other words, if Title IX, among other things, sets up girls' sports, and then you redefine sex to not mean sex, and so boys can now compete against girls, doesn't that actually abolish girls' sports? Doesn't that actually abolish Title IX itself?
Yeah, of course it does. But of course, the way that they get round this is by claiming that the transgender girls, i.e. the boys who think they're girls, are girls. And so actually what's interesting in this particular case is that both sides are arguing that there's been an affirmative violation of Title IX, i.e. both sides argue that girls have been harmed by either the law or a pushback against law. So it's kind of extraordinary. We really are arguing about whether black is black and white is white here. I mean, but this is why the left do this, and there's lots of people who've written on this, from Orwell to sort of the late Roger Scruton, about how the left sometimes think that by changing language you can in some way change metaphysical reality. I mean, it's a certain degree of magical thinking that I don't know how rational people can buy into it, but that is what we're seeing in this case.
Well, the left has talked about this for even longer than all that. I mean, this has been a strategy used by left-wing theorists all the way back to Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Communist Party leader, who, and up through various academic thinkers and into the 20th century, who say that by changing language, we can actually change our political reality. And another way they do it is when you change the language, you no longer have to fight the political battle. So in this case, if the argument is that they want to let boys who identify as girls, who think that they're girls or want to be girls, play in the girls' sports, we could just pass a law saying that, couldn't we? You could go persuade your fellow citizens, pass a law, and then that's all fine. But they know that law would get vetoed. Nobody would actually vote for that. And so they try to avoid it from the very beginning. We saw this in another issue, actually, just maybe 10 years ago, and building up through the last few years, which is the issue of same-sex marriage. The question of same-sex marriage was always, what is a marriage? Does sexual difference play some role in marriage? And then the way the left won that battle is they redefined marriage from the very beginning. And they said, no, marriage is just a relationship between two individuals regardless of sex. So then the question became, who has the right to get married? And, if the question becomes who has the right to get married, then they've already won that, because we all want everybody to have rights. It's this very subtle game of language, because the actual debate on the marriage question was, what is a marriage? And I guess the actual question here is, what is a girl? Maddie, you've been following this very closely for a long time. I can't say that I'm very encouraged by what this judge is saying here. I mean, are we just headed inevitably for a world in which the judges and a bunch of robed lawyers redefine sex and forces transgender ideology on us?
Well, I think we are going to see it's going to become a big fight, and we're awaiting, actually, as we speak, another case in the Supreme Court this time, Harris Funeral Homes, which is another Alliance Defending Freedom case, which they should be coming out with a decision on that fairly soon, and that will set precedent, legal precedent, which if it goes their way, the activist way, would be very, very hard to undo. But you're absolutely right in the sense that it fundamentally comes down to this ontological argument, what is a woman, versus this rhetorical argument, what is polite to say, essentially. It's very problematic, though, because, of course, I sometimes think that conservatives don't do enough to kind of make the rhetorical point case themselves. I mean, what we're talking about here is, never mind offending these boys who want to compete against girls. I mean, it must be so humiliating and excruciatingly painful to be excluded from your sport, to watch people who to be male just dominate you in sports. And then when you have legal counsel representing your case, to be told to say something that you believe to be a lie, or that they have to say something that you believe to be a lie. I mean, I think there's a kind of an emotional side of it on the women's side as well, which I think is just which is very real and often looked over.
Now, those women are always getting looked over, aren't they? I mean, that is the issue that you don't hear about here is, first of all, it's humiliating because you don't get to, seriously compete in your own sports. But there's a real hard money side of this, too. You could lose out on scholarships. You could lose out on awards and on being recruited for different teams. My friend Matt Walsh always asks this question when this transgenderism issue comes up. And the question is very simple. It's, what is a woman? And the left doesn't seem to give an answer to that. They kind of scoff at the question, but they don't seem able to answer it. Maddie, can you give an answer? You've got a number of years' expertise on being a woman. What is a woman?
A woman is a person who is of the female sex, and we have various biological markers which we use to define that, which are absolutely self-evident at birth.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you go to the chromosomes, and we go to hormones and reproductive organs, but we're just stating the obvious here. Like, we know, I mean, everybody knows what a woman is. In very, very, very rare cases, there can be a level of ambiguity to be discussed between families and doctors, but that is a completely separate issue, and they know that. This transgender thing is just, as you say, Michael, you can't define it. There's no definition.
Yeah.
It's just anybody who says that they are.
You know, Maddie, in our remaining minute or two here, do you have any sense of the court gossip? Because I've followed this case as well, the Harris Funeral Home case, which is not about Title IX. As I understand it, it's about Title VII. It's about whether you can have an employer say that a man has to wear the uniform that a man wears, and a woman has to wear the uniform that a woman wears, and even if the man thinks he's a woman or vice versa. How is this case going to go? I've been told that one of the great hallmarks of the Trump presidency is that we've gotten these conservative or originalist judges. Are we going to have a proper definition of sex vindicated, or are some of these judges going to go squishy?
Well, the difficulty with the Harris case is it's quite complicated because, as you point out, part of it's to do with this dress code thing, and then part of it is also to do with the definition of sex. It wasn't that encouraging in the oral arguments, to be perfectly honest. Not as encouraging as I thought it would be based on the fact we have a conservative court. Mm-hmm. You know, Gorsuch said a few things which were kind of suggesting he was sympathising more than I thought he should with the other side. We'll have to wait and see. It does look like it's going to be one of those cases that's going to be so explosive either way. It wouldn't surprise me if they waited till the very last moment of the term just to drop that bomb.
Right.
But I really wish I could give you a firmer answer, but I just don't know.
That's fair enough. I wanted to get some gossip out of you. Maddie, you're unlike so many other political observers who emphatically make predictions, then they all turn out to be wrong, but then they keep going on and making predictions. Instead, you are just giving a more cautious and probably reliable analysis. But this is a real fear. You know, if Gorsuch goes squishy on this, that's going to have serious ramifications for the credibility of originalism, for the credibility of conservative jurisprudence. We would be in a very, very tense situation if that were to occur, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Maddie, thank you so much for being here. Madeleine Kearns, the William F. Buckley Fellow in Political Journalism at the National Review Institute. Please go and read her stuff. It's really, really great. Maddie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.